call the March 15th meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order, please. I'm going to start out with the Citizens Forum. That's where if we have anybody in the audience who has a comment or question that's not related to what's on the agenda tonight, they can come up and do it this time. Ruth has some comments to make.
I just have two, just as a reminder that next week is the training session. I believe it's on Wednesday, and it's at 8:30 downtown at the MTAS facility. If you need any instructions how to get there, just let me know. And you may all want to think about carpooling, so after the meeting you might want to get together and talk about carpooling. The other thing I would like to announce is that some of you or all of you are familiar with the Montgomery Trail. It was dedicated about 2.5 years ago. And we have just started a program where we're volunteers to take over various garden beds. So if you or anybody is interested in volunteering to adopt a garden bed, we would love to have you. Mark and I met with Joyce Montgomery and a couple of volunteers this afternoon going over it. And I know my dog and I have adopted one, and which is kind of a hazardous because I have a black thumb, so we'll see how that goes. But there's a lot of there's a lot of there's a lot of beds. Some of them are larger than others. So if you are interested, just get with Mark or I, and we'll be happy to work with you and coordinate. And Joyce will do a training with you. And or if anybody on TV land is interested, call the town hall. We'll be happy to have you.
Mention a little bit about how the gardens over there got started.
Joyce Montgomery is the family that donated the trail land to the town of Farragut, and she is a master gardener in the state of Tennessee. So she designed these garden beds, and they are native species. They take a few years to get it built, to kind of take over. They've limped along because of just problems with labor, but it's a great trail. While we were out there today, we saw several people walking their dogs. One of the beds is a rain garden, and it definitely gets water because there used to be a large log about this big, and it's floated to a different location, so it is appropriately named. But if you haven't had a chance to go out there, take a walk out there and take a look at them, and if even a little bitty bed strikes your fancy, let us know.
Appreciate the Montgomerys doing that, too. Anybody else? Approval of the minutes for the February the 16th, 2011 meeting. Does anybody have any changes or comments on the meeting, on the minutes? If not, do I have a motion? Second? Discussion and public hearing on a subdivision plat for National Healthcare Corporation, NHC Place, to move an interior property line, parcel 22 and 22.05, tax map 130. Approximately 44 acres, zone C-1 and B-1, and a variance request from the requirement to construct a sidewalk on Kingston Pike in front of parcel 22, National Healthcare Corporation, Tom Campbell applicant.
At your place is the staff recommendation for this evening. Tonight, this subdivision plat is of the NHC Place that is located on the next to Sugarwood Drive, fronts on Cabot Hill, Kingston Pike, and Sugarwood, and then also the vacant parcel that's located to the west. They are moving the property line approximately 25 feet to accommodate the parking lot expansion that they were doing on the west property line. This is where they're moving the property line to this location. As part of the subdivision regulations, we require that a sidewalk or walking trail, a pedestrian facility, be built adjacent to Kingston Pike. This is a minor subdivision, and we are recommending approval of the variance request. Because it is just a minor moving of an interior lot line, and also although several hundred feet away from Kingston Pike, there is a walking trail that runs through here. And so we are recommending approval of the variance. There is an existing sidewalk in front of NHC and down Cabot Hill. So we are recommending a variance from the requirement to construct the trail at this time. If the property is further subdivided or a site plan is brought in, a trail or sidewalk would be required at that point in time, so we know that it is not a lost situation, and also that there is a viable, safe alternative currently with the walking path. With regards to the subdivision plat, we are recommending approval of the plat subject to changing plat note, just changing the word dividing to property in plat note 10 and obtaining the appropriate signatures.
The applicant have any questions or comments? And you are in agreement with these two subject twos?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from anyone on the planning commission? Anyone else have any questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
Second.
All those in favor? Oh,
Plat or the variance?
We need.
You need them separate?
You need two motions.
Well, it's up to you guys.
Can we craft it in one motion? Would that be easier?
I meant it as both. So.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Just so I clarify in the minutes.
And I second it as both.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on a site plan for the expansion to National Healthcare Corporation NHC Place for an addition of a therapy center and parking lot. 120 Cabot Hill Lane, parcel 22.05, tax map 130. Approximately 20 acres, zone C-1 and B-1. National Healthcare Corporation, Tom Campbell, applicant.
Trying to find the picture that shows the best what's being done. Let's go with this one. This is Sugarwood over here, Cabot Hill, Kingston Pike. They're proposing the addition of a therapy center in here, and then also the addition of a parking lot over in that area on the west side. The parking lot will be draining to a rain garden, and the rain garden in turn, if it overflows, will connect to a catch basin that's located here, and then will ultimately drain to this detention basin in this east corner of the property. The rain garden, however, likely most of the water will just be contained there and drain and sink into the ground like it's designed to. The therapy center is, because of the addition of the therapy center in the interior of the site, there will be some modifications to the landscaping. They're going to be removing an arbor, but this represents the therapy center area that's being added. And they are moving their putting green over to this location. It's currently in the vicinity of where the addition is. This addition, because of the building configuration, will not be visible from Sugarwood or from the neighbors, just because it's in this courtyard because of these existing buildings in this area and right here. So the addition won't really be visible. This parking lot, however, there is an existing buffer strip, and so they will be removing those plants and moving that to the west. In your packet, as the explanation is, I've explained that 1998 is when NHC was initially constructed, and since that time they have built on the nursing home wing, which is this area right here. One of the changes that has occurred in our regulations since that point in time was the modifications to our pedestrian section of the Chapter 4 of the zoning ordinance. You all made those changes about a year and a half or so ago. I can't remember exactly when it was that you all approved those. And part of the requirement is we used to have the requirement that walking facilities were required on adjacent collectors and arterials. We now require that the facilities be tied to that there be walking facilities along all adjacent roads, and that the Planning Commission makes the determination as to whether it's a walking trail or a sidewalk. What I included in your packets was a diagram just representing an option for you to consider. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a walking trail here, and this is a sidewalk here on Kingston Pike and along Cabot Hill. And what we would recommend is that this be a walking trail connecting from the walking trail to Kingston Pike, and then a sidewalk along Sugarwood. And then they add their pedestrian facility connection to Sugarwood Drive. The pedestrian network through this area, providing, Sugarwood is a spine street as defined in our subdivision regulations, but also that's really where most of the activity is to the east. If you're an employee, or you want to walk to the drugstore, walk to Ingles at lunch or something like that, going to the east is your natural activity pattern, or just going to Weigel's to pick up something, that would be your natural activity pattern. Also, if you are a resident or you're a visitor visiting a resident, this provides the option of a loop for walking. At your places is the staff recommendation for the site plan, and we are recommending approval of the site plan subject to addressing items 1 through 16. The last couple just being a reminder that the landscape plan has to be approved before a grading permit can be issued, and then the submitting of the drainage fee and the letter of credit for erosion control.
Yes, I do. I'm Jeff Beckett with Cannon & Cannon. I'm representing NHC for this project. And I think with the agreements, we received the comments, and we reviewed the comments, and we are in agreement with the comments, except for comments 7 and 8. And those are the items that we would like to discuss further. We understand the pedestrian ordinance and understand the intent of it. What we don't understand is, based on the size of this project, the requirement for the sidewalk expansion along Sugarwood and the pedestrian connection. Really, the size of the expansion is a therapy addition. It's not adding any more staff or adding any more patients, but it's really just providing more services for the NHC facility. With the expansion, I believe it's about 3,000 square feet, and based on the overall square feet of the site, it's about a 2% addition to the facility. So based on that, we're had the questions along with that, the connection to Sugarwood and connection to Kingston Pike. The existing pedestrian facilities and sidewalks along the development comes through the site to Cabot Hill. And once you get to Cabot Hill, you have the two choices, similar to what Ruth has already mentioned, down the Greenway or Kingston Pike. Really, the facilities and the management of NHC want to funnel and want to focus the pedestrians through this area for security reasons and for just overall observance and seeing the traffic of the pedestrians. It's really a security and a focus that they want to keep it through that direction. A connection to Sugarwood and through Sugarwood would more compromise and be difficult to really maintain and from a security standpoint of patients and outside coming into the facility. Along with that, the expansion itself, the cost, since it's a small expansion, we understand the intent of the pedestrian and ordinance. With the overall siting expansion, it's a small cost for this expansion, but for an overall portion of the sidewalk, it's a large percent of that to do the sidewalk. We understand, for a major development that the intent of the sidewalk, is something that would be acceptable. So really, along with that, the security and the cost and the existing facilities that do funnel to Kingston Pike, we recommend relief from this request for a sidewalk along Sugarwood and pedestrian connection. And we would like to discuss it further and would like your comments.
Was it Baker or Bacon?
Beckett.
Beckett. Okay. Mr. Beckett, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 3 years ago, there was some concern from the residents about the heating and air conditioning units making too much noise for some of the residents of Sugarwood. Is there any validity in what I say on that?
I remember the discussion with the site development plan. I'm not aware of any current questions.
My name is Tom Campbell. I represent NHC. And to address that question, yes, there was concerns, and we addressed those issues by doing two things, or by doing one thing in particular, and that was putting a variable speed motor on those HVAC equipment to eliminate the bang which occurs when a system like that starts up. So we added about $20,000 to $30,000 worth of controls to that equipment to minimize that problem.
I assume the new addition will have this same solution?
We're actually using a completely different system. It'll be a small split system, not much different than what you'll see in a small office building with condensing units outside. So it's not tied into that system. So we won't be aggravating that or adding to that.
I have no questions regarding that anymore.
Ruth, is this a planning commission decision, or is this something that the variance needs to be approved by the zoning appeals board?
Because this is a requirement within the zoning ordinance, your discretion through this process is just as to whether it would be a walking trail or a sidewalk. The appeal of having to construct this would have to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals.
All that we can decide here is whether it's going to be a walking trail or a sidewalk, and anything else, 7 and 8, need to go to zoning appeals. Is that correct? So what do we need to do about that?
Mr. Chairman, does Sugarwood Drive, is there a sidewalk on the opposite side of the road from that?
I'm sorry, what?
Is there a sidewalk on the church side of Sugarwood Drive?
No, there is not. There is no sidewalk on Sugarwood. The Planning Commission, what you could do is determine where you want walking trails versus sidewalks, and then they, as the applicants, have the right to then go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that process can be simultaneous as they're going through the construction of this, and just that it's prior to the end, prior to the certificate of occupancy, that a decision is made, and whatever the BZA determines, that they would construct accordingly. So you would just adopt it, approve it with a particular design, whether you chose the staff recommendation one or whichever, and then if they choose to appeal that, then they could take that to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then the Board of Zoning Appeals would make the actual determination as to whether they would need to construct anything or not.
That makes sense to you?
That makes sense. The timing of it, I need a little bit
You would be
further.
able to get a grading permit and everything as
Okay.
long as everything, you got the, everything taken care of.
Right.
And then simultaneously, you could take that through the Board of Zoning Appeals. So
Okay.
it would show up on your plan with whatever the Planning Commission approved. If then the Board of Zoning Appeals took an action that deviated from what the Planning Commission approved, then you would just submit a revised site plan showing that deviation from that.
Okay, that makes sense.
But if I may ask for some clarification on that and some support, if if this were a larger project, like Jeff said, you wouldn't be hearing from us. But as you could tell from Ruth's presentation, this is such a small project that it's even hard to pinpoint on our campus plan. And as such, it's a small budget. And as you know, cost today is everything. We succeed in our business by controlling costs. And, you know, when we came for tonight was just to ask the Planning Commission to take a common sense approach to our application. We would like to start on this small addition to, you know, improve the services that are already, you know, second to none in the community, but we want to be ahead of the curve, you know, with these new facilities. You know, this may seem like a very small thing, you know, to the Planning Commission, and normally it is. It's not, but as we look at it, it's not just $20,000 of concrete. It's, we've got to mobilize a contractor to take them out of that courtyard over to Sugarwood. There's significant grading that will have to occur. We've got to bridge a culvert, put handrails on it. We've got to deal with utilities that are in the road. And again, if it's a small project, I mean a big project, that's easily absorbed by, you know, the overhead and the costs that go into it. But because it's so small, it's going to have a significant impact on our budget. And so really what we're asking for is the Planning Commission's support to eliminate those additions to the sidewalk and the pedestrian connectivity. And the other reason is, quite honestly, we really don't care for the connection between the parking lot and Sugarwood because of our concerns for our resident safety. If a resident leaves our building, we want them to have to walk down the parking lot or our sidewalks past the two entrances that we have to the driveway where there is traffic, you know, that can pick up a wandering resident or alert us that there's wandering resident. And if we make that connection, we lose some control over the security of our residents. And we'd prefer not to have that sidewalk connection. And if we don't add that sidewalk, then, you know, the question of doing Sugarwood as part of this whole project, you know, just really sort of exacerbates, you know, the issue at, you know, for NHC. So,
Ruth, I do have a question for you. The little yellow segment you've got there, is that part of the mandatory as well? Okay. I do want to tell you, we really enjoy having you as part of our community. I want to go on record as saying that. You bring a lot of value to our town. Now, as was stated, there's only so far we have authority to do here. And individually, you know, the board can share their comments with the Board of Zoning Appeals. But I just want to make that clear. You know, all we can do tonight is vote it up or down as a whole. But again, I want you to know we value having you here. So.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Follow up. Can the Planning Commission make a recommendation to the BZA?
I don't know. I've not had it come up before.
I mean, I would think they would look for guidance.
Actually, the Board of Zoning Appeals has very strict guidelines in which they can review and approve variances. It's identified and spelled out in the state law. The Planning Commission actually doesn't get that kind of training with regards to that, so it would not be appropriate for them to make a recommendation in that.
They are a judicial body, and so we are not. And that's,
we can certainly make our individual thoughts on it. If we can't act
Silent
as
show of hands?
no, we can't do
No, but
anything.
nice try.
If it's an official body, we can't, you know, but we can certainly as individuals.
One thing I would certainly appreciate and that from Sugarwood Drive, going down a little yellow strip down there, just going into the parking lot. But anyway, it'd be nice if there's a walkway of some sort rather than having to walk through the grass. Which is the option that you have, like I use, because I'd rather walk down there than make 2 left turns in Kingston Pike.
I do appreciate your comment on that. And we at NHC just have to balance, the needs of our residents and their security against the needs of the community. And where there's a clear, mutual path, we'll embrace that. If it's a situation that we think is not in our residents' best interest, then of course we're going to have to advocate for them. And our concern about that connection is that some of our residents, will be able to wander from the campus, and we lose track of them easier that way than if they have to pass by our primary entrances.
Guess I don't understand what the sidewalk to Sugarwood Drive is supposed to do. Sugarwood Drive has no sidewalks, and it's grassy there where this sidewalk would come out. I don't get it. And so what is it about our requirements that says that we require that a sidewalk be put there?
Require that for all commercial developments, whenever there's a site plan that goes through the Planning Commission, that a sidewalk or a walking trail, that option is up to the Planning Commission, be provided on all adjacent streets. In the case of Sugarwood, you actually have a high volume of traffic, and there is no pedestrian facility, and it is definitely appropriate for a pedestrian facility, and I think that's what Commissioner Whiting was just saying, is that is appropriate. But that can be taken up by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
But this is in our ordinances.
Correct.
Any more questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion for approval, and if we, as part of that, Ruth, my motion would be that it be a sidewalk versus a walking trail.
What I have drawn is a walking trail just from this section.
Yeah, I would recommend go sidewalk the whole way, including the little gold.
Yeah, the gold
rail.
would be up to them, but that's
Okay.
because that's on private property. The reason we went with a walking trail on here, let me see if I can show it wrong direction, is because of the heavy trees right through here, and that it would take it off and kind of meander around more like a asphalt. And this, let me get this here.
And it'll do less damage to the trees. Is that what you're
Well, we're trying to get it off of the trees, kind of like what we did down at Christ Covenant Church, down there at the corner of North Hobbs. Now, that particular one is a sidewalk, but along through here, this is adjacent, according, on the, because the way it is, the current terrain. It's just this one, because it would be off the edge, that's why we figured, since it's tying into a walking trail, just to extend the walking trail to Kingston Pike. This drawing shows it better.
Well, I'll amend my motion then to go with the staff recommendation on the type of path and move for approval.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And you will get with Ruth and find out your procedures that you need to go from here.
Thank you very much.
Discussion and public hearing on an annual review and approval of concept plan for cottages at Price Farm located on the southeast corner of McPhee and Evans Road, zoned R-1 and OSR. And Ruth, for the benefit of the audience, would you hopefully by now we all understand that every year we have to do this, but please tell that part again.
Okay, as part of the concept plan process, the Planning Commission is required to reapprove a concept plan every year, and this is for several reasons, one of which is really to keep it on the forefront for you guys, because it's kind of a heads up to let you know that you will be seeing more preliminary plats and more final plats in the future. It's also a reassurance to folks that have purchased into a development so that they know that it's going to continue even if it takes a few years to complete it. We all kind of got spoiled in the mid-2000s because things happened very quickly, and never before had we experienced that, and likely we, at least in my professional career, we won't experience it again. It's going to take longer to finish out subdivisions. And so the purpose of this is to kind of remind you all what has been approved, but also so that when a preliminary plat comes in for the next phase, you're familiar with what the overall development looks like. What we have here is this is the Cottages at Price Farm located at the corner of McPhee Road and Evans Road. Just the first phase has been constructed, and that is to about here. If you remember, about a year ago or so, they came in and amended and changed this area from attached to detached dwellings. And so that is part of this concept plan because it has been revised. And we recommend reapproval of this concept plan.
Basically, that's all we're doing. We're not making any additions,
No, we're not making any
nothing.
changes or modifications to the development at all.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Down to the microphone, please.
Red button. Hi.
Talk, and then
Okay.
tell us who you are
My
and
name's-
give us an address, please.
My name's Kim Roten. My office address is 1524 Bridgewater Lane, Kingsport, Tennessee. I'm Mr. Michael Reedy's attorney. He couldn't be here. He's out of town on business, but he wanted someone to be here to assure everyone that this development is moving forward and that we're doing our best to be able to get all of the paperwork done from the old owners, moving it over into the new owners' hands, and they're capable hands. I can tell you that. I just wanted to let you know.
Glad to hear that. We get a lot of requests for people that are very interested in purchasing in that development.
That's what I'm hearing, and we're trying our best. It's more the legal paperwork. I'm working with 6 other attorneys just to try to get the development into legally the right hands. So it should be moving along very soon. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone
you.
else have any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
Your address again, please.
1524 Bridgewater Lane, Suite 102, Kingsport, Tennessee 37660.
Appreciate you coming
Thank
down
you.
to reassure us.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? To have a
I'll
vote?
tell you that I have met with Mr. Reddy, and I really like his look at the future. He's got some big ideas, and I hope they succeed.
Have a motion? Second?
Second.
That was,
Onesie is.
yeah.
I'm good
Uncanny
at
that they were
voting this
dead
time.
on. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 6 is discussion and public hearing on amendment to the Farragut Municipal Code, Title 14, Land Use Control, to create minimum building facade requirements.
This is a staff-initiated amendment to the municipal code. Obviously, being an amendment to the municipal code is actually not required to be heard by you all, the Planning Commission. But since you all are the folks that review site plans, felt it was appropriate for this to go to you on the front end to vet this and get your comments. The purpose of this ordinance is really, we have never had, other than our town center district, of which we did a training session a couple months ago at the Planning Commission, at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, we do not have building facade requirements, architectural review requirements, whatever you want to call them. To date, the town has been extremely fortunate in that we have a very attractive town, and generally speaking, designers have taken into consideration what is adjacent to to them whenever they're doing designs of structures. This building is an an objective, not a subjective ordinance, meaning that it is not a matter of whether you like how the building looks or anything like that. It is about that there is a maximum amount of a metal facade, being metal composites and or aluminum, a facade of excuse me, a maximum of 15%, and this does not include metal roofs. And so in essence, if you remember when we did the building facades training a couple of months back in this for the Planning Commission, there's a wide variety of facades that we see coming through here. We don't see a lot of metal facades, and what this does is just restrict that primarily by having a maximum of 15%. It is dictating that the metal would be an architectural accent rather than the majority of the facade. By being objective, it's just going to be, currently as part of the site plan process, you're required to show what the building is going to look like. And so at that time, we will be asking them to verify that it does not exceed the 15%, and we will be doing a double check on that. But it isn't going to be, I don't like that roof line, I do like that roof line, I wish there was a gable in or something like that. That is something that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen may pursue after we have completed the land use plan, but this is just kind of the first step in the process. I sent this ordinance to the Farragut Business Alliance, and we had a meeting on Tuesday to identify any concerns that they may have. We actually made one minor change, and on page 2 of Ordinance 1206, under the scope, second paragraph, second sentence, we changed it to read, if the maximum metal composites and or aluminum is exceeded on the remaining undisturbed facade area, then the modified portion of the facade shall include no metal composites, and or aluminum. The idea is that just because you're making modifications, if it's not exceeded elsewhere, you should be able to use metal accents on the addition. So it's just if it's exceeded. We really don't have hardly any metal buildings in town, so it's not a huge issue in this respect, but that was just identified as an area that we probably want to clean it up, because we never know if we're going to have annexations in the future or things like that. And we want it to be very clear. But if anybody has any other comments, normally we go through a workshop session before we go for a vote on something, but this is pretty straightforward. And also, like I said, this being in the municipal code, it isn't something necessarily that the Planning Commission would normally look at, but like I said, you guys are going to be kind of the body that's the review body with it. If you feel comfortable with it, if you do not feel comfortable with it, it can be postponed.
Questions or comments?
Ruth, as far as the 15%, was there some kind of study analysis or what? I mean, other than just that seemed about a right number, let's start with that and see how it works.
I had direction to look at a few buildings and to calculate what their metal was, because there was some expression of not favorableness. And so that is how I came up with the 15%.
I have a couple of comments regarding this, and one has to do with the use of the word facade. And is our objective, I guess let me back up a little bit. A lot of individuals equate a facade with being the front portion of the building, the front portion that faces the public access, the predominant public access. And is this something that we are just concerned with one elevation of the building, or are we concerned with all 4 elevations of the building? Because I thought if we are concerned with all 4 elevations of the building, we may want to further define the word facade to maybe include all exterior walls. There might be some additional language. And
Yes, we are. This is for all 4, 5, 6, however many sides there are to the building.
Well, that's what I thought the intent of this was. So I think I would encourage us maybe to further define under the definition of building facade, the section 14-604, or there might actually even be a better location, maybe in our. I'm trying to think where to further define the word facade, or maybe we're really looking at exterior walls.
That's what I was thinking. That
maybe
say
substitute
no
the word
exterior walls of any building, just change facade in that statement.
I just don't want to mislead anybody. They say, well, you said just facade.
I think you bring up a great point. That could easily happen because what you said is true.
The other thought that I had that kind of goes with this, possibly, would this be an appropriate time to include a requirement for maybe basic earth tone colors, reds and tans and browns, and maybe we could try to not have some of the maybe pinks or yellows that every now and then pops up?
The intent behind this is very basic and not to be turned into subjective from the objective.
Right.
This is so.
You're saying maybe we'll tackle that later. Is kind of what you're saying. Tackle the whole color issue at some point in the future. Okay. I think it's a good start. I know we've talked a lot about brick, and maybe that's something that after the land use plan is finished, then we can start developing that ordinance later and get some more community involvement.
I have it in our budget for next year.
Okay.
For that to be pursued. We're not sure with the completion of the land use plan if it really is going to be realistic to tackle next year, but possibly. So we're planning for it to be tackled at the end of next fiscal year, but it may not happen until the beginning of the following fiscal year. But that is our intent at this time.
Other questions or comments?
I was looking at the metal. The other thing in the walls usually is also frames and windows. I assume that's a nit, not be used in the calculation, or is that something that needs to be spelled out?
Never have occurred to me to include windows, but if you want to clarify that, the reason I specifically mentioned the roofs is because we do have several metal roofs in town, and they would exceed the 15% right off the get-go if you included the metal roof. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Ed makes a good point, though.
But we can just say metal roofs and window frames shall not be included in the total calculation.
Ruth, everywhere it says facade in this, you're going to change?
I'm not going to change it because I'm going to keep it facade because it's kind of like celebratory ordinance. Facade's much easier to say than
exterior wall ordinance.
Just doesn't quite have the same ring to it. So I will.
Parenthetical, the first
yes,
use.
that's what I was thinking about. This chapter shall regulate all new buildings that require. I think it would be more appropriate under the scope. This chapter shall regulate all new buildings that require the submittal of a site plan and all existing building where exterior facades, and then parenthetical phrase, exterior walls, are being modified that require the exterior, that require the submittal of a. Is that satisfactory?
Questions or comments?
All exterior walls, comma, are being modified.
Can we go ahead and vote on this tonight, or do you need to do more?
I'm fine with this if you all are fine with it, if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, I think our changes are pretty minor.
Comments stated to approve.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Do we have any public utilities?
No, there are none.
In that case, we're going to adjourn the meeting, and then we're going to have some training about the land use plan plan that's coming up. So the meeting is adjourned, March 15th,